They say Ohio's highways never really sleep. Long after midnight, when the towns go quiet and the fog crawls low across the asphalt, the truckers keep rolling, carrying steel, lumber, and stories that no one believes. But some roads hide more than potholes and shadows. Strange way stations that appear out of nowhere, convoys that vanish into fog, screams that come from trailers long emptied of their cargo. Tonight we uncover 10 of the most disturbing trucker encounters ever reported across Ohio. True accounts whispered over CB radios and buried deep in midnight dispatch logs. So before we begin, hit subscribe and turn on the bell, because what you're about to hear may just make you think twice before driving through Ohio after dark. These are the 10 most disturbing true Ohio trucker horror stories. Keep your headlights on, and whatever you do, don't stop for the fog. I'd been on that route plenty of times. Highway 46 eastbound, cutting across small towns that don't even show up right on GPS. Hollow Creek sits right before the county line, a thin, iron bridge from the 1940s that crosses a shallow river. Locals call it the bus grave. They say back in '63 a school bus went off that bridge one morning during heavy fog. Driver lost control. They never pulled the bus out. Just sealed the banks and built a new road over it. Most drivers, especially the older ones, would tell me to never stop on Hollow Creek. You laugh at stuff like that when you're a rookie. But when you've been out here as long as I have, when you've seen headlights appear in mirrors that shouldn't reflect anything, you stop laughing. That night, the rain turned heavier. The kind that feels like it's trying to erase the world. My wipers squealed, keeping tempo with the low hum of my engine. As I approached the creek, fog began to rise from the ditches. It crawled across the asphalt like fingers. My headlights dimmed a little. Not flickered, just dimmed as if something thick passed between me and the light. I leaned forward, squinting. The bridge came into view. Rusted iron bones slick with rain, the old Hollow Creek sign barely legible through the mist. I slowed down to 30. Couldn't see 10 feet ahead. That's when I heard it. Faint underneath the static of rain and engine. At first I thought it was just the metal of the bridge creaking under weight. But then it shaped itself into something human. A scream, short, sharp, like someone gasping for air right beneath my tires. I hit the brakes out of reflex. The truck groaned to a stop right in the middle of the bridge. For a second everything went silent. The kind of silence that presses on your eardrums. My engine idled low. Steam rose from the sides where the rain hit the hot metal. Then I smelled something, not oil, not diesel. Something wet and sour like rusted pennies and lake water. The air inside my cab turned cold. I mean freezing. My breath fogged the windshield. I killed the engine. All I could hear was the soft drip-drip of rain hitting the iron girders. Then, through the fog, I heard a faint splash, like something heavy had just dropped into the water below. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out. My boots slipped on the slick metal, but I managed to walk to the edge, peering down between the rails. The water below looked black, thick, unmoving. I shined the beam, and for half a second, I saw ripples, and not wide like from a rock, but narrow, circular and like something rising. Then the flashlight flickered. It wasn't the battery. I know that light. It pulsed and in rhythm, with something deep below the bridge. A slow, steady beat, and then I heard the scream again, louder this time. But it wasn't a woman anymore. It was children. Dozens of them, short gasps, choked cries echoing through the fog like voices trapped under glass. My CB crackled. I froze, a voice, the faint filled with static, came through. Bus 12. Anyone copy? We're losing control. Then static again. I climbed back into the cab, hands shaking. The CB light flickered between channels, cycling on its own. All passengers. Stay calm. Then, nothing. Just as I reached for the ignition, my headlights flared on their own, flooding the bridge ahead. And there, through the rain, I saw the outline of a bus, yellow, faded, half-transparent, sitting right in the middle of the bridge. The windows were dark. But as my eyes adjusted, I could make out small silhouettes pressed against the glass. Little faces watching. I blinked and the bus was gone. The sound of rain filled the void again. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe instinct, maybe fear. But I threw the truck into gear and started rolling forward. Every part of me screamed to get off that bridge. But as I passed the midpoint, my radio came alive again. They said the driver fell asleep. The voice was small, feminine, like a child whispering through static. We couldn't wake up. Then my dashboard lights went haywire. Gauges spinning, radio screeching, air brakes hissing as if something pressed against them. Through the windshield, I saw reflections, dozens of faces, pale and dripping, staring back at me from the glass. Their mouths were open, but the sound came from inside the cab. "Help us," I slammed the accelerator. The truck lurched forward, gears grinding. My vision blurred like heat haze bending the world. And then, as suddenly as it began, it all stopped. Silence. Clear road ahead. No fog, just the sound of rain fading into distance. When I finally reached the next way station, I stepped out to stretch. The guard on duty looked at me funny. "Where'd you come from?" he asked. "Hollow Creek," I told him. His face went pale. "Bridge washed out years ago, man." "Ain't been no crossing there since '98, I didn't argue. Just nodded, got back in my cab and sat there. Later that night, I checked my dashcam footage. It cut out right as I reached the bridge, then flickered back on at the other end. In between, there's 3 seconds of static, and one faint reflection caught in the chrome hood. A small, wet handprint. I've crossed 1,000 miles since that night. Hauled through storms, slept in frozen lots, seen things I can't explain. But every time the rain starts to fall on an empty highway, I hear that sound again. That distant, choking scream rising from under iron and water. And when my CB hums, just before the static clears, I still hear it. "Bus 12. Anyone copy?" My name's Earl Maddox, and I've been driving rigs for nearly 26 years. I've crossed every state line, every kind of weather you can imagine. I've hauled through fog so thick it felt like you were underwater, through deserts where the horizon shimmered like heat itself was alive. But what happened outside Marietta, Georgia? I can't explain that. No matter how many times I replay it in my head, it just doesn't fit in the world I know. It was a Tuesday night in late October, the kind where the air smells like wet asphalt and burnt leaves. I was hauling auto parts from Birmingham to Savannah, a long, lonely stretch through rural backroads. My rig was an old Peterbilt 379, black cab, silver grille, and enough miles on her that the seat knew the shape of my back. CB was quiet that night. Just the low hum of static, white noise that fills the cab like company. Sometimes you forget it's even there. I'd just passed exit 212 when the rain started again. Light drizzle at first, then heavier, streaking against the glass in long silver veins. The road ahead bent into a slow curve, a section of Highway 41 right before the ridge. That's where I first noticed something off. Every driver knows the rhythm of the reflectors on the road, those little amber cat eyes that catch your headlights in neat rows. They mark your lane, your distance, your sanity at 3 a.m. when you're the only soul alive. But that night, as I came around the curve, the pattern broke. The reflectors started blinking. At first, I figured it was the rain playing tricks on the beams, reflection through water drops. Happens all the time. But these weren't random glints. They blinked in sequence, 1, 2, pause, then 3 in a row, then one long flicker as if something was trying to say something. I frowned, leaned forward a little. Maybe some construction lights? Maybe the DOT testing smart markers? I slowed to 50. Then as I came around the next bend, I saw it clear as day. A row of reflectors lighting up one by one to spell out, "Turn back." I hit the brakes, hard. The truck hissed and groaned against the wet road. I sat there in the middle of the lane, staring at those flickering dots. They weren't flashing randomly. It was deliberate, clear, spaced perfectly apart. TURNBACKTI rolled down my window, expecting to hear some kind of prank. Maybe kids hiding in the ditch with flashlights trying to spook drivers. But all I heard was wind, cold, steady wind, and underneath it a low hum, not mechanical, not natural, like 1,000 whispers tangled together. I told myself it was just my mind playing tricks. Rain, fatigue, headlights bouncing weirdly. I'd been driving 14 hours straight after all, so I pressed on. As soon as I rolled past the sign, the road reflectors changed again. Now they blinked wrong lane. I checked my mirrors. Lane lines were fine. Nothing oncoming. My GPS showed me dead center on Highway 41. Everything normal. Still, the words kept forming. Wrong lane, turn back, stop. Each message would fade, then reappear a few hundred feet later, always in perfect sequence. My heart started hammering. The steering wheel felt slick under my palms. And then, out of nowhere, my CB radio crackled to life. Breaker 19. Anyone out there on 41? A man's voice. Rough, shaky, I grabbed the mic. Yeah, this is Iron Hand out of Birmingham. Who's calling? Static. Then a long pause. Don't follow the lights. And the line went dead. The sound that followed wasn't static anymore. It was breathing. Deep, labored, close, like someone sitting right behind me in the cab. I turned fast, flashlight in hand. Empty seat. When I faced forward again, the reflectors were gone. No amber dots, no white lane lines, nothing. Just black road stretching endlessly ahead. The GPS started glitching, the screen blinking between coordinates. 1 second it showed Marietta, GA. The next it flickered to unknown route. I slowed to 20. No shoulders, no signs. My high beams barely reached 10 feet ahead before swallowing into darkness. The world outside felt flat, like someone had drained the depth out of it. That's when I saw the light again. A single reflector pulsing faintly in the distance, like it was waiting for me. I crept closer. The rain had stopped, but I could still hear it. That's what I can't explain. The sound of rain without rain. It hit the roof, the windshield, the mirrors, but the air was dry. The smell of ozone filled the cab, sharp and metallic. The reflector blinked once, twice, then a dozen more joined it, forming a tight curve ahead in a spiral of blinking dots, like the road itself was wrapping inward. My steering wheel began to vibrate. Not from the engine, from the road. The texture under the tires changed, felt grainy, softer, almost like gravel. I eased to a stop. Killed the engine. Silence. When I opened the door and stepped down, the ground didn't feel right. It was smooth, too smooth, like glass slick with dew. My flashlight beam hit nothing but mist, no trees, no sky. Just black, mirrored surface stretching in every direction. And in that reflection, I saw my truck parked perfectly still. Except, inside the cab, someone was sitting in the driver's seat. I froze. The figure in the cab moved, slowly, turning its head toward me. I couldn't see its face, only a faint glow where eyes should have been, like the reflection of headlights on wet chrome. Then the CB crackled again. Iron Hand, the voice was mine. You're in the wrong lane. Every reflector around me lit up, hundreds now, flashing faster and faster until the entire road was a sea of amber light. I stumbled back toward the cab, shielding my eyes. The lights blinked once more, not random this time, Bill, but forming one last word. Stay. I jumped inside, slammed the door, floored the accelerator. The truck roared, wheels screaming on the slick black surface, and then, just like that, the world snapped back. Rain, asphalt, headlights. The reflectors lined up perfectly normal again. Behind me, only darkness. I didn't stop until I hit the next truck stop outside Canton. My hands were shaking so bad I spilled half my coffee trying to hold it. I told the night clerk what I saw. He just nodded slowly and said, "You've been down by Hollow Bend, huh? They say Dot tore those reflectors out years ago. That curve took 6 rigs in one winter. Drivers kept swearing the lights spelled messages." Later that morning, I checked my dash cam footage. The entire 10-mile stretch past Marietta was pitch black. No rain, no reflectors, no road signs. Just an empty curve, looping endlessly, frame after frame. But at the 30-second mark, just before the screen cuts to static, the footage brightens, like something flickering behind the lens. And in the reflection of the windshield, you can see the word, "Turn back," glowing faintly, right where my headlights should have been. Sometimes, late at night, when the CB hums quiet and the road stretches longer than it should, I think about those lights, how they spelled out words like a warning, how they led me somewhere I wasn't supposed to be. Now, every time I see a line of amber reflectors blinking through rain, I ease off the throttle and whisper under my breath, "Not tonight, Hollow Bend, not tonight." My name's Walter Briggs, folks call me Walt, and I've been driving rigs since '94. I've seen a lot of things out here. Busted engines, whiteouts, people doing 50 on bald tires. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened that night hauling steel out of Cleveland. I used to think I knew every sound a truck could make. But now every time I hear metal shift in a trailer, I feel that same cold crawl up my spine. Because sometimes the sound you think is steel ain't steel at all. It was November 17th, 2019, a Sunday night, cold enough that the air hurt to breathe. I was running solo, hauling 3 heavy steel coils for Midwest Hauling. The pickup was from a Cleveland yard on the south side, near the riverfront, where the fog mixes with factory smoke and everything smells like rust and oil. My rig was a Kenworth T680, 18-speed, about 80,000 pounds total with the load. The dispatch came in late. My route was clear. Cleveland to a metal works facility near Scranton, Pennsylvania. Easy overnight run. When I got to the yard, it was quiet. No music, no machines running. Just the sound of the wind howling through the empty lots. The gate guard barely looked up, just waved me in. The coils were already strapped on a flatbed wrapped in black plastic. The bill of lading said, industrial-grade steel. 28 tons. Handle with caution. Standard stuff. Nothing unusual except the paperwork looked old. Creased, faded, like it had been copied a few times. The loader, a skinny guy in a hard hat, barely spoke. He just said, keep it tight and don't stop on the way. I laughed and said, you paying me overtime for that? He didn't laugh. Didn't even look up. Just said, they don't like being left alone. I figured he meant thieves or vandals. I wish that's all he'd meant. By the time I hit the I-80 turnpike, it was close to midnight. The sky was heavy, low clouds pressing down, no stars, no moon. My high beams caught sheets of mist rolling across the asphalt like slow-moving ghosts. CB chatter was dead. Not a single driver checked in for over an hour. I had the radio on low just to keep the silence from getting too thick. Around 12:30 a.m., somewhere past Youngstown, I started hearing something, faint at first. A metallic scrape from the back of the trailer. Nothing unusual. Loads settle, straps loosen, air pressure shifts. Happens all the time. I pulled over at a rest stop to tighten the straps. The air was biting cold and smelled like ozone and wet iron. My breath fogged out in big clouds. The coils looked fine. Chains tight. No movement. But as I walked past the rear latch, I heard it. A sound so faint I thought it was the wind at first. A low, drawn-out moan. I froze. The hair on my arms rose even under the jacket. Then it came again. Higher, strained, like someone gasping through a throat full of water. The sound was coming from inside the trailer. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe an animal got trapped when they loaded the steel. Maybe air escaping from coiled metal. I grabbed my flashlight, walked to the rear, and unlatched the doors. Silence. Nothing but darkness inside. A solid black void that swallowed the light. The coils sat still, wrapped tight in their covers. The air was cold and still, almost too still, like being inside a sealed tomb. I banged the side of the trailer hard. Anybody in there? No answer. I stood there another minute, listening. The silence had a weight to it, like the world was holding its breath. Finally, I locked the doors, climbed back in the cab, and got moving. But 5 minutes down the road, the sound came back. Not a moan this time, a scream. Sharp, human, echoing against the steel. The sound cut through the engine noise like a knife. It wasn't the kind of sound you mistake for something else. It was real, panicked, muffled, trapped. I gripped the wheel tighter, heart pounding. I told myself, and maybe some idiot stowed away. Maybe the loader was right. Maybe kids were hiding in there. I hit the hazards and pulled onto the shoulder. When I stepped out, the first thing that hit me was the cold. It wasn't natural. It felt electric, like standing near a live wire. The air itself seemed to hum, the screaming had stopped. But now there was a new sound. A slow, rhythmic thump. Like someone beating on the inside of the trailer. Thump. Pause. Thump. I climbed up onto the catwalk, unlatched the back door again, and pulled it open. The beam from my flashlight hit the steel. Perfectly still. No movement. But the air inside, it shimmered. Like heat waves, and then something whispered. Just a breath of sound, almost too soft to catch. Help. My light flickered. The batteries were fresh, I'd just changed them that morning. But the beam dimmed until I could barely see the first coil. The whisper came again. He won't stop. I slammed the doors shut. Didn't look back. I floored it. Engine growling. Tires spitting up water from the slick road. I didn't stop again until I saw the lights of Scranton bleeding through the fog hours later. But those screams, they followed me. Every few miles I'd hear them again, faint, muffled, as if buried in layers of metal. Sometimes a man's voice, sometimes a woman, sometimes both, overlapping, panicked. At one point, the CB crackled, white noise fizzing, then a voice came through. Load number 4. Do not open it, I froze. The line was dead silent after that. I checked my manifest. Load number 4, that was mine. I pulled into the Scranton Metalworks yard just after dawn. The rain had stopped, but the fog was thicker than ever, hanging low, swallowing the buildings. The receiving manager, a big man in a brown jacket, came out holding a clipboard. His face was pale as soon as he saw my truck. "Where'd you come from?" he asked. "Cleveland Yard," I said. "Got your steel?" He just stared at me. "That shipment's been here since last week." I laughed nervously. "You must be mistaken. I loaded this last night." He shook his head slowly. "No, son. We signed off on that load Monday morning. Been sitting in Bay 3 ever since." I walked to the back of my truck and froze. The latch, the one I'd sealed myself in, was covered in ice. Thick, crystalline, like it had frozen mid-air. He followed my gaze and said quietly, "Open it." We pried the doors open with a crowbar. Inside, nothing. No coils, no wrapping, no straps, just an empty trailer. The floor was wet, slick with condensation, as if something had thawed recently. The smell was unbearable, like burnt metal and ozone. The manager backed away, muttering something under his breath. I remember him saying, "Not again." Later that morning, a couple of company suits came down. They asked routine questions, times, routes, who signed what. I told them everything. They didn't look surprised, just tired. One of them, an older guy with gray hair and nicotine fingers, finally said, "That Cleveland Yard used to handle mill scrap from a plant that shut down in 2013. One of their coil trucks caught fire on the turnpike. Driver didn't make it. Whole load melted into one mass. Ever since then, every few years, a driver swears he's hauling the same steel." I told him my trailer was empty. He nodded. They always are. That night in the motel, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw flashes. Molten steel. Orange glow, figures trapped inside, pounding to get out. I kept hearing the voice from the trailer. He won't stop. Around 2 a.m., I heard a familiar sound outside, the low idle of a diesel engine. I looked through the blinds. A truck sat parked across the lot. Identical to mine. Same company logo. Same trailer number 4078. The cab lights were on, but I couldn't see anyone inside. Then slowly, the trailer door swung open on its own. And from that distance, even through the glass, I swear I heard it again. A single distant scream. I quit Midwest hauling 2 weeks later, switched to local runs, daylight only. I told myself I'd move on, but every once in a while I'll pass a flatbed carrying steel coils. They'll glint in the sunlight like polished mirrors, and for just a second, I'll think I see faces in the reflection. Sometimes on a quiet night, I still hear the faint hum of that Cleveland Yard through my CB. Channel 19, dead frequency. Load number 4, do not open it. And then the static fades, and the road goes quiet again. But I can't help glancing in my mirrors, waiting for that sound, the metallic scrape, the echo of something human trapped inside. Because once you've heard the screaming load, you never mistake the sound of steel again. My name's Dale Mercer, and I've been driving trucks for almost 20 years. Mostly Midwest routes, Ohio, Indiana, Pennsylvania, hauling freight for a steel distribution company based out of Youngstown. Nothing fancy, just miles of asphalt, diesel fumes, and diner coffee keeping you alive. There's a stretch of road out there, Route 30 near Mansfield, that I don't touch anymore. Not since November 2 years ago. It's not superstition, it's survival. See, every driver who's been in Ohio long enough has heard stories about that place. They say the fog rolls in thicker there than anywhere else. Locals call it the sleeping fog because once it comes down, it swallows everything. Sound, light, and sometimes people. It was a November night, just after 11:30 p.m. The air was colder than it should have been for that time of year, sharp enough that my breath looked like cigarette smoke every time I exhaled. I was driving a Freightliner Cascadia, fully loaded with sheet steel, about 40,000 pounds. The route was simple, Youngstown to Fort Wayne, a run I'd done dozens of times. I was trying to make Mansfield before shutting down for the night. The CB was mostly dead. Once in a while you'd get a voice breaking through the static, another trucker passing through asking about weather or cops. But that night, it was just quiet. Too quiet. Even the usual hum of other rigs on the interstate seemed gone. The sky had that strange orange-gray color, the kind that means fog's coming. I didn't think much of it then, just flipped on the fog lights and slowed down a little. By the time I passed mile marker 223, the fog wasn't rolling in anymore. It was already there, like I'd driven straight into a wall of milk. You ever driven through fog so thick you can't tell if you're moving? That's what it felt like. My headlights hit nothing but a white blur, and the road lines faded in and out like they were being erased. The GPS screen glitched once, just for a second, like the map was trying to load something that wasn't there. It showed me floating off-road even though I could feel the rumble strips under my tires. I tapped the screen. It blinked back to normal. Probably just a bad signal, I told myself. But that silence, it gets to you. The hum of the tires, the faint hiss of air brakes, the low drone of the engine, everything starts blending into a rhythm. And when that rhythm suddenly stops, even for a heartbeat, you notice. That's what happened. The engine noise dropped, just a fraction of a second, like the world inhaled and forgot to exhale. Then it came back, but in that gap something else filled the space. A voice, not through the radio, not through the CB. It was outside, a man's voice, faint and stretched, like it was caught inside the fog itself. Just one word, stop. I eased off the accelerator, eyes straining through the windshield. At first I thought it was my mind playing tricks. Then my high beams caught movement, a figure, a man. Standing dead center of the highway. He wasn't waving or flailing, just standing there, perfectly still, his back slightly hunched. I slammed the brakes. The trailer jolted, ABS kicking hard. The steel coils shifted behind me with a dull metallic groan. The fog flashed bright from the brake lights, then swallowed everything again. The man didn't move. When the truck came to a stop, I could see him clearly through the windshield. He looked old, not elderly, but worn down, like he'd been out there too long. His jacket was torn, soaked with dew. The light hit his face in fragments through the mist, pale with deep shadows under his eyes. I blinked once. He was gone. No sound. No footsteps. Just fog sliding across the road like smoke over water. For a full minute I sat there gripping the steering wheel, waiting for something, anything, to move. Then I noticed something that made my stomach drop, a handprint, right there, on the inside of my windshield, not on the outside, inside, and it wasn't mine. The print was long. The fingers slightly crooked, like they'd pressed from within the glass itself. The condensation from my breath outlined it perfectly. I pulled over to the shoulder and got out just to breathe. My boots crunched the gravel. The air smelled of ozone and cold metal, like the air right before a lightning storm. The fog muted everything, my footsteps, the ticking engine, even the faint hum of power lines overhead. I walked around the truck with my flashlight, sweeping the beam across the asphalt. No skid marks, no footprints, no sign of anyone ever being there. But when I came around to the front of the cab, I noticed something worse. The license plate was gone, not broken off. Gone, like it had never been attached. And that's when I heard it. Faint at first, coming from somewhere down the fog-choked road. The sound of an engine, not a truck engine, higher pitched, rougher. An older vehicle, maybe a car from the 70s. It revved, then faded. Rev it again. The fog glowed faintly in that direction, headlights maybe 50 yards away. But no matter how long I waited, those lights never got closer. I climbed back into the cab, shut the door, locked it, and kept driving. For the next 20 minutes, I didn't see a single sign or exit. No lights, no other vehicles, nothing but fog. The GPS froze again, showing me circling the same stretch of highway. At mile marker 223, the same one I'd passed earlier, my heart froze, because that's when I saw him again. Same man, same posture, standing dead center in the lane. Only this time, when my headlights hit him, I didn't brake. I swerved. Hard right. The truck fishtailed, the trailer wobbling behind me. Somehow I managed to bring it to a stop without jackknifing. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the wheel. I looked into the mirror. Nothing behind me but fog. Then something knocked on the passenger side door. Just 2 knocks. Slow. Heavy. Thunk. Thunk. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. When I finally looked over, I saw the fog pressed tight against the glass, except it wasn't fog, it was a face. The same man's face, pressed against the window from the outside, eyes wide, lips moving, but no sound coming out. His hand touched the glass again, leaving a fresh print right next to the first, and then he was gone. The fog pulled back, the light brightened, and suddenly I could see road signs again. Welcome to Mansfield city limits. It was like waking from a nightmare you're not sure ever ended. I made it to the drop yard just before sunrise. My dispatcher, Don, looked at me funny when I walked in. "Dale," he said, flipping through his clipboard. "You already made that drop-off." I blinked. "What?" He showed me the sheet. The steel coils I'd been hauling, same load number. Same weight, had been signed in 3 days ago. By me, my signature. Right there on the paperwork. I told him it had to be a mistake. That I'd just picked it up last night from Cleveland. But when we went outside to look, my trailer was empty. No coils. No chains, nothing. The bolts on the locking bars were rusted over, like they hadn't been opened in years. I left that yard without another word. When I got back to my truck later that night, the fog had started to roll in again. Not as thick this time, but enough that I saw my reflection in the windshield, and next to it, faint but visible, that same handprint. Still there. It's been 2 years now. I don't drive Route 30 anymore. I stick to the southern runs, Columbus, Dayton, Cincinnati. Anywhere but Mansfield. But every November, when the fog starts rolling in, I can feel him. Some nights, when the CB goes quiet and the road gets too still, the glass on my windshield fogs up from the inside, and right before it clears, I see his fingers, tracing something on the glass, a single word. Stop. I still hear that voice sometimes, caught in the static of the CB, soft, strained, coming from nowhere. And every time it happens, I pull over, kill the lights, and wait for the fog to pass. Because I've learned one thing out there on the road. Some warnings aren't meant to be ignored. My name's Dale Mercer, and I've been driving trucks for almost 20 years. Mostly Midwest routes, Ohio, Indiana, Pennsylvania, hauling freight for a steel distribution company based out of Youngstown. Nothing fancy, just miles of asphalt, diesel fumes, and diner coffee keeping you alive. There's a stretch of road out there, Route 30 near Mansfield, that I don't touch anymore. Not since November 2 years ago. It's not superstition, it's survival. See, every driver who's been in Ohio long enough has heard stories about that place. They say the fog rolls in thicker there than anywhere else. Locals call it the sleeping fog because once it comes down, it swallows everything. Sound, light, and sometimes people. It was a November night, just after 11:30 p.m. The air was colder than it should have been for that time of year, sharp enough that my breath looked like cigarette smoke every time I exhaled. I was driving a Freightliner Cascadia, fully loaded with sheet steel, about 40,000 pounds. The route was simple, Youngstown to Fort Wayne, a run I'd done dozens of times. I was trying to make Mansfield before shutting down for the night. The CB was mostly dead. Once in a while, you'd get a voice breaking through the static, another trucker passing through asking about weather or cops. But that night it was just quiet. Too quiet. Even the usual hum of other rigs on the interstate seemed gone. The sky had that strange orange-gray color, the kind that means fog's coming. I didn't think much of it then, just flipped on the fog lights and slowed down a little. By the time I passed mile marker 223, the fog wasn't rolling in anymore. It was already there, like I'd driven straight into a wall of milk. You ever driven through fog so thick you can't tell if you're moving? That's what it felt like. My headlights hit nothing but a white blur, and the road lines faded in and out like they were being erased. The GPS screen glitched once, just for a second, like the map was trying to load something that wasn't there. It showed me floating off-road, even though I could feel the rumble strips under my tires. I tapped the screen. It blinked back to normal. Probably just a bad signal, I told myself. But that silence, it gets to you. The hum of the tires, the faint hiss of air brakes, the low drone of the engine. Everything starts blending into a rhythm. And when that rhythm suddenly stops, even for a heartbeat, you notice that's what happened. The engine noise dropped just a fraction of a second, like the world inhaled and forgot to exhale. Then it came back, but in that gap something else filled the space. A voice, not through the radio. Not through the CB, it was outside. A man's voice, faint and stretched like it was caught inside the fog itself. Just one word. Stop. I eased off the accelerator, eyes straining through the windshield. At first, I thought it was my mind playing tricks. Then my high beams caught movement, a figure, a man, standing dead center of the highway. He wasn't waving or flailing, just standing there, perfectly still, his back slightly hunched. I slammed the brakes. The trailer jolted, ABS kicking hard. The steel coils shifted behind me with a dull metallic groan. The fog flashed bright from the brake lights, then swallowed everything again. The man didn't move. When the truck came to a stop, I could see him clearly through the windshield. He looked old, not elderly, but worn down like he'd been out there too long. His jacket was torn, soaked with dew. The light hit his face in fragments through the mist, pale with deep shadows under his eyes. I blinked once. He was gone. No sound. No footsteps. Just fog sliding across the road like smoke over water. For a full minute, I sat there gripping the steering wheel, waiting for something, anything, to move. Then I noticed something that made my stomach drop. A handprint. Right there. On the inside of my windshield. Not on the outside. Inside. And it wasn't mine. The print was long. The fingers slightly crooked, like they'd pressed from within the glass itself. The condensation from my breath outlined it perfectly. I pulled over to the shoulder and got out just to breathe. My boots crunched the gravel. The air smelled of ozone and cold metal, like the air right before a lightning storm. The fog muted everything. My footsteps, the ticking engine, even the faint hum of power lines overhead. I walked around the truck with my flashlight, sweeping the beam across the asphalt. No skid marks, no footprints, no sign of anyone ever being there. But when I came around to the front of the cab, I noticed something worse. The license plate was gone, not broken off, gone like it had never been attached, and that's when I heard it. Faint at first, coming from somewhere down the fog-choked road. The sound of an engine, not a truck engine, higher pitched, rougher. An older vehicle, maybe a car from the 70s. It revved, then faded. Revved again. The fog glowed faintly in that direction, headlights maybe 50 yards away. But no matter how long I waited, those lights never got closer. I climbed back into the cab, shut the door, locked it, and kept driving. For the next 20 minutes, I didn't see a single sign or exit. No lights, no other vehicles, nothing but fog. The GPS froze again, showing me circling the same stretch of highway. At mile marker 223, the same one I'd passed earlier, my heart froze. Because that's when I saw him again. Same man, same posture, standing dead center in the lane. Only this time when my headlights hit him, I didn't brake. I swerved. Hard right. The truck fishtailed, the trailer wobbling behind me. Somehow I managed to bring it to a stop without jackknifing. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the wheel. I looked into the mirror, nothing behind me but fog. Then something knocked on the passenger side door. Just 2 knocks. Slow, heavy. Thunk. Thunk. I didn't move, I didn't even breathe. When I finally looked over, I saw the fog pressed tight against the glass, except it wasn't fog. It was a face, the same man's face, pressed against the window from the outside, eyes wide, lips moving but no sound coming out. His hand touched the glass again, leaving a fresh print right next to the first, and then he was gone. The fog pulled back, the light brightened, and suddenly I could see road signs again. Welcome to Mansfield city limits. It was like waking from a nightmare you're not sure ever ended. I made it to the drop yard just before sunrise. My dispatcher, Don, looked at me funny when I walked in. "Dale," he said, flipping through his clipboard, "you already made that drop-off." I blinked. "What?" He showed me the sheet. The steel coils I'd been hauling, same load number, same weight, had been signed in 3 days ago. By me. My signature. Right there on the paperwork. I told him it had to be a mistake. That I'd just picked it up last night from Cleveland. But when we went outside to look, my trailer was empty. No coils. No chains, nothing. The bolts on the locking bars were rusted over, like they hadn't been opened in years. I left that yard without another word. When I got back to my truck later that night, the fog had started to roll in again. Not as thick this time, but enough that I saw my reflection in the windshield. And next to it, faint but visible, that same handprint. Still there. It's been 2 years now. I don't drive Route 30 anymore. I stick to the southern runs, Columbus, Dayton, Cincinnati. Anywhere but Mansfield. But every November, when the fog starts rolling in, I can feel him. Some nights. When the CB goes quiet and the road gets too still, the glass on my windshield fogs up from the inside, and right before it clears, I see his fingers, tracing something on the glass, a single word, stop. I still hear that voice sometimes, caught in the static of the CB, soft, strained, coming from nowhere. And every time it happens, I pull over, kill the lights, and wait for the fog to pass. Because I've learned one thing out there on the road. Some warnings aren't meant to be ignored. My name's Tom Reeves, 27 years on the road, hauling everything from frozen meat to steel pipe. I've seen near-death crashes, drunks walking the median at 3 a.m., even a twister tearing across I-70 once. But nothing ever rattled me like that fog-drenched night on Route 250. It was late November, the air sharp enough to sting your lungs, and I was pushing east out of Cadiz, Ohio, with a load of generator parts bound for Richmond. Midnight run, no company on the CB, just the low hum of the diesel and the rain whispering against my windshield. The fog rolled in around the Hocking Hills turnoff, thick as cigarette smoke, curling over the road in sheets. My headlights barely reached 20 feet ahead. I slowed to 40, gripping the wheel tighter, radio humming static. That's when I saw her. She appeared like an afterimage, white fabric flickering in the mist. For a split second, I thought it was a deer, maybe a tarp blowing loose, but then she stepped into the beam. A girl, maybe 18, standing barefoot by the guardrail, her prom dress torn and soaked, ribbons hanging like seaweed. She waved both arms like she was drowning in air. Jesus, I whispered, slamming the brakes. The trailer hissed behind me, brakes biting wet asphalt. I rolled to a stop beside her, engine idling heavy, fog swirling in the headlights like smoke around a campfire. She looked terrified, makeup streaked down her face, hair plastered to her neck. I rolled the window down halfway. You okay, miss? Her voice was small, raw.
Hey, can you take me home?
Where to? Greenwood, she said without hesitation. Just up the road. I didn't know the name, but I'd passed through 100 small towns in Ohio with signs you could miss if you blinked. She was shivering so hard I could see her shoulders twitch. Hop in, I said, leaning over to unlock the passenger side. The fog swallowed her as she walked around the front of the truck. For a moment, she disappeared completely. Then the passenger door creaked open and she climbed in without a sound. Up close, she looked wrong. Not dead, just misplaced, like she belonged in another decade. Her dress was the kind of faded pink you see in old Polaroids, sequins dull with age. Her hands were pale, fingers clenched tight in her lap. Thank you, she whispered. No one else stopped. I tried to keep it casual. Been out here long? She shook her head. Just since the dance. Her eyes flicked toward the windshield like she was watching something out there. Something only she could see. The cab filled with a faint smell, wet earth and something metallic like rust or blood. I turned up the heat, trying to shake the cold seeping into my bones. The road ahead was a ghost itself. Fog, wet asphalt, my headlights cutting through nothing. So? Greenwood, I said. What's near it? Gas station diner. She turned her head slowly toward me. It's home, she said simply. That's when the CB crackled. A burst of static, then a man's voice half buried in white noise. You still on 250, driver? You got a rider in there? I froze. I hadn't called anyone. The channel was clear all night. I grabbed the mic. Yeah, this is Reeves, eastbound out of Cadiz. Who's this? Silence. The static thinned, replaced by something faint like breathing on the line. Then it went dead. The girl didn't react. She just stared ahead, her hands still folded, her reflection ghosting in the windshield. We passed mile marker 112, but something was off. I'd just seen that sign 10 minutes ago. I chalked it up to fog fatigue. But as we drove, the markers repeated again. 112, 113, then back to 112. The fog pressed thicker. My dashboard clock blinked 12:47, then reset to 12:47 again. Your town close? I asked, keeping my voice light. Almost, she said. Just past the bridge. There wasn't supposed to be a bridge for another 20 miles. But as we rounded a curve, there it was. An old iron truss bridge, black against the fog, slick with rain. The girl smiled faintly. That's it, she whispered. I slowed down. Where do I drop you off? On the other side. The bridge groaned under the truck's weight, metal echoing like distant thunder. Halfway across, the lights flickered, then everything went dark. Headlights out. Dashboard dead. Engine still running, but no lights anywhere. The world outside was swallowed in fog and silence. Damn it, I muttered, flipping switches. The cab felt colder. Breath fogged in the air. When I looked at her again, she was staring at me. Eyes wide, no longer scared, just sad. "Thank you for the ride," she said softly. Then the seat beside me went empty. No sound. No door opening. Just gone. But the seatbelt, it was still buckled, and the air where she sat felt colder than the rest of the cab. I stopped the truck in the middle of the bridge, shaking. Rain hissed against the metal, fog wrapping the cab like a blanket. I unbuckled, swung open the door, and climbed down with my flashlight. The beam barely cut through the fog, but I could see wet footprints leading away from the passenger side. Bare feet. Toes pointed forward, stopping right at the guardrail. I leaned over, shining the light down. Just black water below, swirling slow and deep. Then I saw it, a reflection in the water. Her face, pale and blurred, looking up. My chest tightened. The reflection smiled, and then she sank away. I scrambled back to the truck, heart hammering, slamming the door and locking it. The engine coughed, lights flickered back on, and I floored it across the bridge until the fog finally began to thin. When I looked in the rearview mirror, there was nothing behind me but a wall of mist. I made it to Richmond by dawn, hands still shaking on the wheel. I parked at the lot behind a diner off Route 60, poured black coffee until my stomach burned, trying to make sense of it. No one knew a Greenwood near Route 250. I asked locals, checked maps, nothing. Closest was a cemetery 5 miles south. Out of morbid curiosity, I drove there later that afternoon. It was small, quiet, hemmed in by pine trees. The fog had lifted, leaving the air sharp and dry. Halfway through the rows, I stopped. A headstone near the back caught my eye. Weathered granite, name half faded. Emily Ward, 1958-1976, forever young. Lost on the way home from prom. My stomach dropped. The date matched the kind of dress she wore. I reached out and touched the stone. The granite was ice cold, even in the noon sun. Then I noticed something else. Pressed into the soft earth in front of the grave. A single bare footprint, fresh. That was 15 years ago. I've driven that route dozens of times since. I've told myself it was exhaustion, fog, a trick of the mind. But last November, another driver on the CB mentioned seeing a girl in a pink dress along Route 250. He said she waved for help, then vanished before he could stop. He laughed it off. But his voice trembled just enough for me to know he wasn't joking. I don't take that road after midnight anymore. Sometimes, though, when the fog gets thick and the CB goes quiet, I hear a faint voice beneath the static. "Can you take me home?" And when I glance at the passenger seat, the belt is buckled again. My name's Earl Donnelly, 32 years behind the wheel, most of it running freight between Toledo and Indianapolis. Seen my fair share of weird. Folks standing on overpasses at 3 a.m., cars without plates tailing for miles, even a tornado ripping through Route 24 once, but nothing compares to what I saw one November night near the Ohio-Indiana line. I don't tell this story often. People either laugh it off or get quiet and stop asking questions halfway through. Maybe they see in my eyes that I'm not making a damn thing up. It was November 12, 2009. Around 2:15 a.m., I was hauling electronics out of Toledo, bound for a warehouse in Indianapolis. Flatbed freightliner. 18 speed, steady 68 on the cruise. The air was cold enough to frost the mirrors, and a light mist floated over the cornfields. Nothing thick yet, but it was getting there. The CB was quiet. Most drivers had already pulled into rest stops because the forecast said a fog bank was coming through, same as it always does this time of year near Van Wert County. But I had a deadline, and after 3 decades, I figured fog was the least of my worries. Mile marker 7 came up on the right, just past an old diner that had been shut down since the 80s, the kind of place where the neon still hums even though nobody pays the power bill. That's when I saw the first one. It started as a shadow in the mirror, a dark shape sliding up from behind, no headlights, no running lamps, then another one behind it, then a third. 3 trucks. They rode tight, bumper to bumper, perfectly spaced. No company logos, no dot markings, just dark silhouettes gliding through the mist. I squinted into the side mirror. Hard to tell make or model, but they looked military. Boxy, matte, like decommissioned transport rigs. I reached for the CB. Breaker 19, any of you eastbound fellas see them rigs behind me? Static. Then a faint voice came through, warbled by distance or interference. Ain't nobody out there but you tonight, driver. I scanned again. Still there. No headlights, just shapes following in perfect formation. The gap between us stayed exactly the same, even when I sped up to 70 or dropped to 55. That's when I noticed something else. The fog ahead wasn't moving. It hung still, thick as paint, rolling low over the asphalt. When I drove through it, the air felt heavier, metallic, almost charged, like being too close to a power line. The gauges flickered once, then settled. I told myself it was just the weather, maybe reflection, maybe nerves, but deep down I could feel it. Something was wrong with the air itself. About 20 miles west of Van Wert, the road goes straight for what feels like forever. You can see the red lights of the wind turbines blinking for miles. I glanced in the mirrors again. The convoy was closer. I could see the front grills now, flat, colorless, with something painted over where a logo should have been. Their engines made no sound. I mean none. Not a hum, not a growl, just the quiet hiss of wind across the cab. My own rig felt heavier, like gravity itself was pulling me backward toward them. Then the CB came alive again. Convoy secure. Proceed west. The voice was calm, distant, mechanical. Not like a driver. Like a radio transmission buried under snow. I froze. Who is this? I said. Identify yourself. No reply, just that same whisper of static, like breathing between words. Another 20 miles. They never broke formation. Not once. Then, just before the state line, the fog thickened until the world vanished outside the windshield. I could barely see the lane markers. My speed dropped to 40. The convoy pressed closer, their outlines fading in and out behind me like ghosts underwater. Then nothing. They were gone. Just me, the fog, and the low hum of my own engine echoing too loudly in the silence. I checked my mirrors again and again. Clear. Rear camera feed. Blank. Even the static on the CB stopped. It was like someone had turned off the world behind me. When I crossed into Indiana, I pulled into the first rest stop I saw, just past the State Route 49 interchange. My hands were shaking so bad I nearly dropped my thermos. The air outside smelled strange. Ozone, burnt rubber, and wet metal, like the aftermath of a lightning hitting a junkyard. A tanker driver was sitting on the curb smoking. I asked him if he'd seen the convoy. He frowned. What convoy? 3 rigs. No lights, no markings. They followed me all the way from Van Wert. He took a slow drag, eyes narrowing. You must be new to that stretch. No, sir, I said. Run it twice a month. He nodded toward the westbound lanes, voice dropping low. That fog bank you drove through? That's where the military convoy vanished back in '74. Storm rolled in just like tonight. Locals said they were hauling something classified. Whole line of trucks disappeared between mile markers 7 and 26. Never found a scrap of metal. Not one license plate, just skid marks that end mid-road. I laughed nervously. Come on, that's a story, he shrugged. Suit yourself. But you'll hear 'em again. Some nights when the fog's right, they run that route like they never stopped. I didn't believe him, at least not then. I got back in the cab, wiped the fog off the mirrors, and sat there a while, letting the engine idle low. When I finally checked the odometer, something didn't add up. I'd left Toledo with 218 miles to go. By the time I hit that rest stop, it should have read 154, but it said 178. I'd lost 24 miles of distance, like I'd driven in circles without moving at all. I thought about turning around the next morning, maybe seeing if the tracks were still there, but I didn't. Some things you don't chase twice. Now, every time I run west past Van Wert, I keep my eyes glued to those mirrors. Some nights the fog hangs low again, and for a heartbeat, just one heartbeat, I swear I see shapes moving inside it. 3 of them. Perfect formation, no lights, no sound, and the air in the cab turns cold, carrying a faint voice under the static. Convoy secure. Proceed west. That's when I kill the CB and keep driving, because if you ever look too long into that fog, you might not come out on the same road. Exit 13 rest stop, exit 13 rest stop. A supernatural trucker confession. told in the style of buried files. Approx. 1,000 words. My name's Tom Halpern. I've been driving rigs for 23 years, long enough to know every stretch of I-70 between Kansas City and Dayton. There's comfort in the repetition, you know? The same mile markers, the same coffee at the same gas stations. Until the night I took exit 13. I was hauling steel coils from St. Louis to Pennsylvania. Nothing special, just a midnight run I'd done a dozen times before. The weather was clear, but the air had that metallic smell it gets before a storm. My CB was quiet except for a few late-night jokers running their mouths out of Indianapolis. I had the cruise set at 68, coffee cooling in the cup holder, and the hum of the tires was starting to blend into white noise. That's when I noticed it, a sign I didn't recognize. White reflective letters, exit 13 rest area, 1 mile. Funny thing is, I know that stretch. There isn't supposed to be an exit 13. It jumps from 12 straight to 14. Always has. But the sign looked new. Fresh paint, no rust. I figured maybe I'd just missed a renovation notice. My eyes were burning anyway and I needed a nap before hitting the mountains. So I took it. The ramp curved down longer than it should have. No lights except my own beam slicing through fog. The road felt narrow, tight, like it was folding in on itself. I eased up on the gas, hands tight on the wheel. When the fog broke, I saw it. A rest area, small, 2 rigs parked side by side near the vending machines. The place looked half finished. The pavement was smooth, but the restroom building had no sign, no vending machine lights. Just concrete walls and a humming security lamp that flickered like it was fighting to stay alive. Still, a spot's a spot. I pulled alongside the other rigs, set my brakes and cut the engine. The silence that followed was too heavy. No chirping insects, no wind, no distant highway hum. Just the faint idle of the 2 rigs next to me. Deep, rhythmic, steady. But here's the thing. I couldn't see anyone inside them. I stepped out, stretching my legs. The air was cold, sharper than it had been on the highway. Smelled like ozone, that burnt metal tang you get near a power line. I glanced inside the nearest cab. The driver's seat was empty. The dome light was off, but the engine kept running smooth as ever. I called out, "Hey, you all right, driver?" No answer. I walked to the other rig. Same thing, engine on. No one inside. That's when I noticed something else in the license plates. Both rigs had plates blackened out. No numbers. Just flat metal rectangles that looked melted, my gut twisted. Something was off. I turned to head back to my truck, surveying, and that's when it happened. Every radio from both rigs clicked on at once. A low hiss of static filled the air. Then beneath the static I heard it, faint, breathy, drawn out. My name. Tom. I froze. It came again, overlapping itself, distorted like multiple voices whispering through broken speakers. Tom Halpern. I backed toward my cab, eyes darting between the rigs. Their engines started revving, not fast but heavy, like someone was pressing the accelerator halfway and holding it there. The ground vibrated beneath my boots. Who's there? I shouted, voice cracking. You messing with me? No response. Just the sound of engines growling deeper, louder, until it felt like the air itself was shaking. Then the security lamp flickered out. Darkness swallowed everything but my own headlights. I jumped back into my cab, slammed the door, and locked it. My hands shook as I turned the key. The engine stuttered before roaring to life. My CB, which had been silent, burst into static. Breaker 19, you out there, Tom? It wasn't a voice I recognized. Low, rough, like gravel grinding in the throat. Who is this? I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The line crackled, and I swear to God, I heard myself answer. Same tone, same inflection. This is Tom Halpern. You shouldn't have stopped. The CB went dead. I didn't wait another second. Slammed it into drive, floored it toward the exit ramp. But the ramp wasn't there. I circled the lot twice, headlights catching the edge of the woods that seemed to press closer each time. The fog rolled back in, thick, swirling. And in that fog I saw shapes, outlines of trucks, dozens of them, parked in rows deeper into the mist. Their headlights flickering on one by one like a silent convoy awakening. I finally spotted a patch of asphalt that looked like road and hit it at full throttle. Tires screeched, gravel sprayed. My trailer fishtailed, but I didn't care. Then, just like that, I was back on I-70. No ramp behind me, no fog, just open highway and the sound of my own ragged breathing. My GPS was blinking, recalculating over and over, and my clock had jumped ahead 3 hours. It was 4:17 a.m. when I stopped at a truck stop outside Dayton later that morning. I asked a couple of other drivers if they'd ever seen a new rest area between exits 12 and 14. They laughed, said there's never been anything there. One guy even joked that 13's an unlucky number, so the state skips it. I didn't laugh. I checked the route again a few weeks later in daylight. Nothing but forest and drainage ditches where the ramp should have been. No signs, no construction. Sometimes, though, when I drive that stretch late at night, my CB crackles on its own. The static hums for a few seconds, and if I listen too long, I swear I can still hear it. That voice, my voice, saying, "You shouldn't have stopped." Since that night, I don't take unlisted exits. I don't stop at quiet rest areas, and I keep my radio off whenever I pass between mile markers 147 and 149, because sometimes the static still whispers my name, and when it does, I hear an engine idle right behind me, even when I'm the only rig on the road. My name's Ray Dobson, been a truck driver most of my adult life. Started out in the early 2000s hauling lumber, then moved into heavy freight. Nothing fancy. Flatbeds, coils, machine parts. I've seen my share of weird nights on the road, but what I saw that December outside Hocking Hills, Ohio, still makes my hands sweat every time fog touches the asphalt. Truckers trade stories. We sit at diners or rest stops, sip bad coffee, and talk about phantom headlights, dead radios, hitchhikers who vanish. But the story of the Black Dog of Hocking Hills, that one's not just a story to me, I saw it. And I think it saw me too. It was December 13th, close to midnight. I was running Route 33, heading west from Athens toward Columbus, pulling a 53-foot dry van loaded with steel parts. My Freightliner was running smooth, a steady hum under the cab, CB chatter faint in the background. I'd just passed the Logan exit when the weather shifted. A thin mist started curling over the road like smoke from wet leaves. Hocking Hills gets that kind of fog, damp, rolling heavy with pine and earth. It settles low and makes everything sound muffled, like the whole world's holding its breath. I wasn't tired, not yet. I'd had my last coffee about an hour back and was making good time. Still, the deeper I went into those hills, the quieter it got. The road felt lonelier than usual. No tail lights ahead, no headlights behind. My CB crackled once, a single burst of static, then silence. A few miles past the old Hocking River Bridge, my high beam swept across something crouched low near the guardrail. At first I thought it was a deer, big one, maybe a buck, but as the light caught it full on, I realized it wasn't. It was a dog, or at least shaped like one. Its fur was pitch black, matted and glistening like oil. But what froze me were its eyes, not glowing like a normal reflection from headlights, but lit from within, a pale yellow that pulsed, slow and rhythmic, like breath. It didn't flinch. Didn't move, just crouched there, muscles tense, head tilted low, watching me pass. The sight lasted maybe a second, but my stomach knotted up like I'd swallowed ice. My instinct said keep driving, so I did. Hands tight on the wheel, pulse pounding. But when I checked my side mirror, it wasn't crouched anymore, it was running. The damn thing was keeping up with me. I was doing 70 on a downgrade. Engine humming, and it was right there. Its silhouette flashing in and out of the fog along the shoulder. Every few seconds, its eyes would catch my running lights, twin yellow orbs slicing through the gray. No matter how much I sped up, it stayed there, parallel to the cab. No sound but the wind and the rhythmic thump of tires on expansion joints. Then, I heard it. A deep, ragged breathing, not from the engine or the road, from outside the passenger door. Like lungs dragging through water. I swear I could feel the vibration through the metal frame. For 5 miles, that thing ran beside me. The whole stretch from the old man's cave turnoff to the mouth of the tunnel past Rockbridge. Every instinct screamed to hit the brakes, but something in me said that if I slowed down, it'd jump. Maybe onto the hood, maybe into the cab. When I reached the tunnel, I floored it. The sound of the tires hitting the wet asphalt echoed through that tunnel like thunder. I shot through in second, and when I came out the other side, it was gone. Just me, the empty road, and a steering wheel slick with sweat. The next morning, I told myself it had to be something explainable. Maybe a black bear, maybe fog and headlights playing tricks. Truckers see strange things when fatigue sets in. Shadows that look like movement. Reflections that seem alive. I tried to let it go. But when I stopped at the Circle K near Lancaster to fuel up, another driver, Ed, a local flatbedder, asked me straight up, "You running through Hawking last night?" "Yeah," I said. "Why?" He gave me a strange look, half grin, half pity. "Had your lights flicker around mile marker 211? I froze, because yeah, they had. Twice, right before I saw the thing. I hadn't even mentioned that part. Ed just nodded slow. Black dog. Been seen there since the 50s. Some say it's an omen. Others say it's what's left of a trucker that burned up on that grade back in '59. His rig went over the guardrail. They never found his body, just a set of tire tracks and gouges in the road. He said it like a ghost story, but his eyes didn't smile. 3 weeks later, I had to take that route again. No way around it. Company dispatch had me hauling sheet steel to Dayton, same stretch of road. I told myself I wasn't going to spook easy this time. I left earlier in the evening, stayed alert, kept the radio on low. But around 11 p.m., just as I neared that same grade, the fog returned, thick and sudden. The same smell filled the cab. Wet iron, burned rubber, ozone. I passed mile marker 211, and then the CB crackled. A deep, distorted voice broke through the static, so faint I almost missed it. "Keep your lights low." That's all it said. Then silence again. I switched channels. Nothing. And that's when I noticed something ahead. Faint scratches in the asphalt, long and curved, running parallel to the lane. At first I thought it was tire marks from chains. But when I rolled over them, the steering wheel shuddered. When I stopped at the rest area past Rockbridge to check, my headlights illuminated the road behind me. Those weren't tire marks, they were claw marks, 4 deep gouges. Each about a foot apart, dragging across 50 feet of pavement. The surface wasn't just scratched and it was melted. The asphalt warped like it had been seared. I should have turned back. Every sane bone in my body told me to, but truckers don't get paid to quit halfway. So I kept rolling, easing into the Rockbridge tunnel again. Halfway through, the fog thickened inside, like smoke being sucked into a vacuum. My headlights dimmed to amber and the cab temperature dropped 10 degrees in seconds. Then came the sound. A howl. Not like any animal I've ever heard. It was low and wet, full of static like it was coming through the walls. The whole tunnel seemed to breathe around me. And then, for the briefest moment, I saw it in my side mirror, sprinting behind the trailer. Claws sparking on the asphalt. It leaped. The trailer lurched as if something massive had hit it from behind. The cargo straps rattled. The metal groaned under sudden weight, and then silence. When I burst out of the tunnel's far end, I half expected to see the back doors ripped off, but they were intact. Just 4 parallel gouges etched deep into the stainless steel. Each one burned black at the edges. When I pulled into the yard in Dayton the next morning, I didn't say a word. Just parked, logged my hours, and climbed down to check the trailer again. The scratches were still there. You could slide a finger into them. The metal was warped as if something hot had carved straight through the sheet. The yard foreman, a guy named Russ, whistled when he saw it. "Damn, Dobson, what the hell did you hit?" I didn't answer. He took a photo, said he'd report it to maintenance, but when I came back the next day, the marks were gone. The trailer had been washed, buffed, repainted. No trace of damage. I checked the paperwork. That unit number didn't even exist in the system anymore. It's like it had been erased. That was 3 years ago. I still drive, but I reroute whenever I can to avoid Hocking Hills. Every winter, I hear about strange calls coming over the CB, distorted voices warning drivers to keep your lights low. One rookie out of Cincinnati said he saw the eyes. 2, yellow like fireflies in fog, he told me. He laughed when he said it, but his hands trembled when he picked up his coffee. A week later, his rig jackknifed near mile 211. The police said there were no skid marks, just long gouges in the pavement leading straight toward the guardrail. They never found the trailer, just the cab, engine still warm, lights still on, and the driver's seat torn open by something with claws. Some nights, when I'm rolling down empty highways and the fog creeps over the hood, I swear I catch a glimpse of those eyes in the mirrors, pacing me, just outside the reach of the beams. I try not to look too long, because if that thing catches you watching, it doesn't let go. I still think about the warning from the CB, that impossible voice in the fog. Maybe it wasn't trying to scare me. Maybe it was trying to save me. Keep your lights low. I do now, every night, because once you've seen the black dog of Hocking Hills, you never want it to see you again. Name's Ray Mullins, 49 years on the road. I've been driving since my 20s. Long hauls, short hauls, coast to coast. If it's got a highway number, I've probably seen it. And for all that time, I've always said the same thing. You can't scare a man who lives behind a windshield. But that was before the night I pulled into the way station that wasn't there. It was late October, somewhere along I-70 eastbound heading through Missouri. I'd left Kansas City around 9 p.m., hauling produce in a refrigerated trailer bound for Columbus. The forecast said clear skies, but the air was thick, like the night was sweating. My dash clock read 2:47 a.m., and the highway had gone quiet. You know how it gets out there past midnight, just your headlights slicing through the dark, the hum of tires and the low groan of the reefer unit. I hadn't seen another rig in 20 minutes when the sign appeared out of nowhere. Way station, 1 mile. White reflective letters, clean as new paint. Funny thing is, I didn't remember a station on that stretch, but I was overdue for a weight check anyway, and I figured maybe Missouri Dot had opened a new one. So I slowed down, flipped on my blinker, and rolled into the off-ramp. The lot was dimly lit, a long concrete pad stretching under flickering sodium lamps, the kind that buzz and hum like dying insects. A brick station building stood to the left, glass windows blacked out. The green open sign glowed faintly in the window, half lit like it didn't know if it should be working. And there, standing on the platform, was a man in a faded tan uniform, waving me forward with a flashlight. He didn't say anything, just motioned me to pull up onto the scale, so I did. Rolled forward slow, air brakes hissing, tires squealing slightly on the slick surface. The guy nodded, gestured for me to stay put. Then he turned, disappeared behind the glass door of the office. That's when the silence hit me. Usually you can hear trucks idling, radio chatter, the low rumble of generators. But here, nothing. Even my reefer seemed to have gone quiet. The sound had just folded in on itself. I reached for my logbook on the passenger seat, leaned over to grab my paperwork, and when I looked back up, he was gone. The booth was dark. The flashlight he'd been waving sat on the ground, rolling slightly in the breeze. I waited. 10 seconds, 20, hey, I called out, window half down. You need my papers or what? No answer. Just that low electrical hum from the lights above me. Then through my side mirror I caught movement, a figure standing behind my trailer, half shrouded in the dark. I flicked my reverse camera on, and for a split second, I saw him there, same uniform, same posture, but no face, just blackness where his head should have been. As if the light refused to touch him, my stomach dropped. I threw the truck into neutral, hit the air brakes hard, heart hammering in my chest. All right, that's enough, I muttered, forcing a shaky laugh. Some prank, huh? I leaned out the window again. The air was colder now, sharp and metallic, like ozone after lightning. The lot lights flickered once, twice. Then they all went out. For half a second, everything was pitch black, and in that dark the CB radio crackled, static first, then a low voice breaking through. You shouldn't be here. It was calm, slow, like a whisper through a tunnel. My hand went for the ignition. But before I could twist the key, the lights came back on. Only now. The building looked different. The clean brick had turned to charred concrete, blackened and cracked. The windows weren't tinted anymore. They were shattered, jagged glass framing an empty interior. The green open sign melted, its plastic dripping down the frame. Smoke stains crawled up the walls, and in the center of the lot under those flickering lights stood 3 more trucks. Or what was left of them, burned out shells, frames twisted and corroded like they'd been sitting there for decades. The man was gone. So was the scale office door. And the sign at the ramp that said, "Open"? It was nothing but a bent pole and ashes. I slammed the truck into gear, tires screaming against the concrete, and bolted for the ramp. But when my headlights hit the road, it didn't lead back to the highway. It curved into fog. thick swirling gray fog that clung to the windshield. I kept driving, foot heavy on the pedal, eyes locked on the faint yellow line beneath me. Then for just a moment, I saw something through the fog, a row of figures standing along the shoulder, all in uniform, all burned, their skin peeled and cracked like ash. One of them lifted his hand, and in that faint orange glow of my headlights, I saw his face, or what was left of it, mouth open, no eyes. And he whispered again, though I couldn't tell if it came from him or my radio, "We're still on duty." When I burst out of the fog, I was already back on I-70. My GPS froze for a moment, then blinked like it was recalculating. The screen flashed signal lost for about a minute before it caught up again. I pulled over at the next open truck stop near Columbia. The clerk behind the counter, young kid, maybe 19, said he'd lived there his whole life. I asked if he knew about a way station west of here. He looked at me funny, said the old one on that stretch blew up in '98, a propane leak. 3 state inspectors died in the blast. The remains were bulldozed. No one ever rebuilt it. I didn't sleep that morning. I just sat there in my cab staring at my odometer. It showed I'd driven 6 extra miles, but there's no record of that exit on the GPS log. Sometimes when the fog's thick on the interstate and I pass that part of I-70, my CB cuts to static again. Always the same faint words hidden under the hiss, "We're still on duty." And every time I roll over a scale pad now, I glance in the mirror, half expecting to see a man in a burned uniform waving me forward. Because once you've been weighed at a station that isn't there, you start to wonder if something out there still thinks you never left. My name's Tom Radley. Been hauling freight since the late 80s. Back before GPS, before these fancy dashboards started talking to you. I've logged near 2 million miles across the Midwest. Flat roads, hard nights, diesel in the veins. But there's one trip I can't explain. And I've tried, believe me, I've tried. It happened on Route 35. Somewhere between Chillicothe and Jackson, Ohio, a quiet stretch, no towns, no truck stops, just the occasional farmhouse light way out in the fields. That night, I was hauling a half-loaded refrigerated trailer, poultry shipments headed to Dayton, reefer humming steady at 28 degrees, air thick with that faint chemical chill. I'd left Charleston around 10 p.m. planning to drive straight through till dawn. The sky was clear at first, stars sharp as nails, but as the clock crept past 12:30, fog started rolling in. Not your usual river mist either. This was the kind that clings to the road, makes the yellow lines vanish under your tires. I had the CB on channel 19, mostly static and the occasional chatter. That's when I heard it, a woman's voice, soft, almost like a breath, right against the mic. "He's in your trailer." At first I figured it was bleed over from some late-night prank or bad connection. Happens sometimes when the weather's thick. I chuckled, shook my head, and said, "Yeah, right. If he pays rent, he can stay there." No answer, just static. Then maybe 30 seconds later, the same voice, and clearer now, almost behind me. "He's in your trailer." Now here's the thing. I was the only rig on that stretch. No taillights ahead, no headlights behind. I'd checked my mirrors, even dimmed the dash to make sure I wasn't getting reflections. But something about that voice. It wasn't coming from far away. It sounded like it was inside the cab, like the CB speaker had swallowed the air itself. I turned the volume knob down. The static stayed the same. I turned it off completely and power light dead. And still, under the silence of the engine, I heard a faint whisper, low, cold, breathing my name. "Tom." That's when I started to feel it, a temperature drop. Not from the reefer unit either. This was sharper, almost electric. My fingers stiffened on the steering wheel. Frost crawled along the inside edge of the windshield, spiderweb thin and moving fast. I slowed down, eased onto the shoulder near mile marker 192. My headlights cut through the fog, just enough to make it worse. The road behind me was swallowed in gray. When I stepped out, the air bit like metal. No wind, no crickets, just the faint hum of the reefer behind me. I circled around to the back. My boots crunched on frozen gravel that hadn't been there a minute ago. Then I saw it, the cargo doors, wide open. Frost had bloomed across the entire inside of the trailer. Thick sheets of ice covered the walls and floor, glistening under the taillights like glass. And my tire tracks, gone. The road behind me was smooth, untouched. like I'd never driven there at all. I climbed back into the cab, hands shaking. Tried the radio again. Dead. No static, no hum. Nothing. I flipped the logbook light on and froze. Condensation was forming on the inside of the cab windows, except it wasn't fogging evenly. The moisture traced letters, slow, uneven, from inside the glass. Check the mirror. I don't know what made me do it. Habit, maybe. I turned to the side mirror and saw someone standing about 20 feet behind my trailer. A woman. Long hair sticking to her face, dress torn at the hem, bare feet on the asphalt. She wasn't moving. Just standing there, her head tilted slightly, like she was listening. My headlights flickered, then she raised her hand, palm open, and pointed directly toward the trailer. Before I could even breathe, the CB burst to life again. He's in your trailer. Only this time, it was her voice and a man's voice layered together, deep and shallow, whispering over each other. He's in your trailer. She's in your cab. Every instinct screamed to floor it, and so I did. Gear slammed, tires screamed, engine roared as I tore out onto the highway. The fog broke in ribbons around the truck. The reefer kicked up a mechanical growl, louder than it ever should have been. But even over the engine, even over the sound of air whipping past the cab, I could hear it, something moving inside the trailer like someone shifting boxes. Slow, deliberate. Then, 3 sharp bangs against the wall. Bang, 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 each one harder than the last. The whole rig shuddered. I didn't look back. I just kept driving, mile after mile, until the fog finally thinned and the eastern sky began to pale. By the time I reached the way station near Jackson, the air had warmed back up. I pulled in, heart still hammering, and jumped out to inspect the trailer. The cargo doors were sealed tight. The lock hadn't been touched. When I broke the seal and swung them open, and everything was fine. The crates were stacked exactly how they should have been, except for the frost. Thin patches of it clinging to the inside walls, and a set of handprints on the far end of the trailer door, small ones. Bare, they were pressed into the frost from the inside. When I finally got to Dayton, I told the foreman what happened. He just gave me a strange look and said, "That stretch by Chillicothe, yeah, we've heard things." He said Route 35 used to have a wrecked checkpoint there years ago. Some driver jackknifed on the ice, crushed a car that had stalled on the shoulder, young couple inside. The reefer unit ruptured, froze them solid before rescue arrived. The woman's name? Laura Hastings. She was 27, that was in 1989. And here's the kicker. I still have her name scratched on the inside of my CB casing. I didn't write it there. Found it 2 days later when I was cleaning out the cab. Etched right into the plastic, like someone dragged a key across it, LH227 now. Whenever I run that same route, I turn the CB off before midnight. But every now and then the static still comes through, soft at first, then a whisper. He's in your trailer. And sometimes, when the fog gets too thick and the road behind me disappears, I swear I hear a second voice, calm, right by my ear. She's in your cab.